Hello, everyone, and welcome to this final day of Build. So we're going to be looking at building some modern web applications using Visual Studio and Web Essentials today. If you have any questions, and I will leave room for questions at the end, please find the microphones here scattered among you, because we're being streamed live, so it's going to be really nice if you do that. Everyone can hear you. My name is Mads Christensen, and I work on the Visual Studio and Web Tools team. And if you want to reach me, do so on Twitter. That's probably the most efficient. I'm going to keep you up to date on anything that goes on in our team, ASP.NET, the Web Tools in Visual Studio, and so on Twitter, as well as I read all the boring specs from W3C, right? So you don't have to, and I'm going to keep you up to date with those as well. So I was hoping to go through one thing that we've never really talked about, like what is Web Essentials and how does it fit in? Like, we've never really addressed those things, so let me go through that. We have some brand new things in Update 2 RC for Visual Studio 2013 that was released a couple of days ago, and some updated features as well. And finally, working with images. There was a demo that was cut from the keynote because of time, so hopefully I'll get to that as well so you can see that. So, there we go. What is Web Essentials? It's a Visual Studio extension, as many of you probably know. Like any other extensions for Visual Studio, there are thousands out there. Web Essentials is just one of those. It's completely open source, right? And we take pull requests. There are currently 23 contributors among you guys as well, probably. And pull requests are more than welcome. Like, this is for everyone. Web Essentials is driven by the community and owned by the community. This is not like Microsoft's thing. This is all of our thing, okay? So if you have a good idea, if you want to change some stuff, you are more than welcome to do so, right? Pull requests are, of course, accepted. Let's try this again. So over time, features will graduate from Web Essentials and into Visual Studio. And we've seen that in the past. In 2012, we saw CoffeeScript and the Less editor start their lives in Web Essentials and then move into an update to Visual Studio last year. And the same with PageJSON as classes and a lot of other small things, and larger things too. And it doesn't actually work in the way that we just take the code from the Web Essentials GitHub project and just copy it into the Visual Studio source code. That's actually not how the graduation happens. Because you have to remember that a lot of the code that goes into Web Essentials is written by me. Trust me when I say you do not want my code inside Visual Studio, okay? So that is not what happens. It's the feature. The feature is spec'd out, and the developers, the real developers, not me, or they actually implement the feature the way it should be implemented. So it's a testing ground. It's our official, unofficial playground, if that makes sense. And as a new thing, the web team, my team in Microsoft, we're now going to contribute for the first time to Web Essentials. So we're going to start out, and we already have, by testing Web Essentials. So for those of you who've already been using it, you know that quality is not always to the level we want. And when Web Essentials grows and more features get added, that can be kind of difficult sometimes. So what we've been doing now is that we're actually allocating resources from the web team to test Web Essentials. And that's just the first thing. Hopefully we're going to see actual unit tests and functional tests being added to the open source GitHub project as well. So that's really, really good news from a quality perspective. Another thing we're doing with quality is the way we're doing our releases. So in the past, Web Essentials has been released every 2 weeks with new functionality, and that's been really great. People seem to really have loved that. But because it's so frequent, it also means that we don't get to necessarily test everything to the level we want. So a month ago, we changed that. So instead, we're now doing nightly builds, and when I say nightly builds, I mean a couple times a week, 2, 3 times maybe, something like that you can opt into, okay? This is a manual step. You have to say, I want the nightly builds. Then every once in a while, every month and a half or so, we're going to release the next major release of Web Essentials. And that's when the web team in Microsoft, we're going to actually test it. We're going to test the official releases. But the cool thing is that if you opt into the nightly builds, you're still getting the official releases when they are released as well. Right? So you sort of get best of both worlds. You get to be on the cutting edge, get all the latest and greatest, but you also get the official builds. What you can also do is that you can get just the official builds, but then every once in a while, you know that there's a feature that was added yesterday, and you want to get that version of the nightly. You can get that specific version automatically without you having to opt into the entire automatic push of the nightly builds. So let's see how that looks like. That was not the right one. There we go. So if we go to vswebessentials.com on download, we can see we have nightly builds. And here's a description of how to add the nightly builds feed to your Visual Studio. And because Visual Studio have this notion that you can add your own feeds, so that's what we're doing here. And that means that you're now getting the latest nightly builds whenever they are released. Just the same way that you get the new versions today, but it happens automatically. If you don't want that, but just want like one time, you can go down here and just download this guy, and this is always the latest nightly build. If you take the latest nightly build and a new official release is coming out, you'll still get the official release, right? Visual Studio will still prompt you and say, hey, there's an update. So you don't actually lose anything here. So that's pretty cool. And people have been asking, so what is Web Essentials? What is its role? What type of features are sort of green-lighted, which are good to put in Web Essentials and which are not? And the rule is, if it has anything to do with web development, it probably fits in Web Essentials. Okay? It has to be something with web. But it can be the smallest little feature, or it can be like huge features as well. Let me give you an example of the latest feature that we added, just to give you an idea of how small these features can be. So this is Van, our tester on the editor team. He was sort of annoyed, and he sent me an email. He said, why is it that when I'm in CSS and I want to add a width attribute, I get these widows? And immediately when I saw his email, I was like, I have been annoyed by that my entire life, and I didn't even know that, right? So this is a version of Visual Studio where I disabled Web Essentials. So here is the feature in all of its glory. WI, and now we get width, right? Widows is gone. So this is a super small feature. It is so small that it's not even potentially worth writing in the docs that this exists, right? Of course, you can still do widows. You see here it wants an integer. Here you go, widows. So that part still works. Validation still works. We just hide it from IntelliSense. So that's an example of a really small feature. And there's a lot of them. And sometimes that can be difficult to figure out what features are actually in there. So we could go to the documentation and see what are the features. Let's go to style sheets. You know, there's a lot of them. Some of them apply to VS 2012. Some of them apply to 2013. Some to both. But another way we can get a good overview is if we just go into Tools Options and find Web Essentials. And now you can see here we can sort of figure out what's in here. And that's really good to go check this out, because some of the features are disabled by default. Some of them are enabled by default, maybe some features that you don't need or don't want. So it's a good way just to go in here and peek around. An even better way, I think, is to just fork the project on GitHub. And let's go here. This is Web Essentials. 2 projects, a test project, which is not empty. There is stuff in there, but it could be bigger. Okay? And then there is the Visual Studio Extension project right here. And if we take a look, we can see all the different things that are here. Like these are not even in the settings. App cache. What is app cache? Well, that's the HTML5 app cache manifest offline support. Like if you open a file that's called .appcache, you get syntax highlighting. Something simple as that. That is not very used, but you know, it's there. browser link extensions. Here's the menu that we've seen that's pushed in. Here's the code for how we do the design mode that we saw in the keynote yesterday morning. It's all in here. CoffeeScript, CSS, ICE CoffeeScript. We do some image manipulation stuff as well. JavaScript, JSON, which is new. We're going to talk about that. JSON LD, Markdown, less. Robots.txt, you get both IntelliSense and syntax highlighting in a robots.txt file. How crazy is that? Sass, a new thing as well. SVG, Sweet.js compilation. TypeScript, WebVTT. What is that? Well, if you're ever going to write closed captions for HTML5 video, you're going to need this. Maybe you're never going to need it. That's fine, too. And we have some XML. So there's a lot of stuff. The project is kind of big, but it's easy to kind of figure out what you want to do. Oh, I want to hide widows from IntelliSense. Well, that's in CSS. And it's IntelliSense, so it's somewhere in completion, right? Completion and IntelliSense are sort of the same thing. And we're going to filter something, right? So we go into the filters. Hide common, uncommon stuff. So I have a string collection here with as many things and as many property names I want to hide. I only have one. And now I just say, hey, if my collection contains whatever, widows in this case, just mark it as never visible. That is the end of this file. I added this file without doing anything else, and widows disappear from IntelliSense. It is literally this easy to contribute if you want to have your ideas in there as well. Okie dokie. So let's take a look at one of the new editors that we have. Sass. We finally have Sass. Anyone here use Sass? Hands up. A few hands goes up. All right, cool. How many people here use less? Oh, wow, that's like way more. OK. So less and Sass are both two supersets of CSS. Any valid CSS file is also a valid less or Sass file. But then we can add more sugar on top of it, variables, reusable components, and so on. Less is sort of an easy way to get started. And Sass adds a little more power, but also more complexity. So, both are great. It's kind of a personal choice. But we finally have Sass in Visual Studio. And what Web Essentials will do here with Sass is you have Sass on the left side, and you have the compiled CSS output on the right. So that's where Web Essentials comes in and creates the compilation and the preview window. The editor itself is in Visual Studio in Update 2. And Sass is called SCSS, the file extension, so that's a little bit confusing. But that's how that works. And here's another Sass file. I'm creating a mixin. This is a reusable component that I can call and use anywhere else in my Sass file. And what I'm doing here is I'm creating a cross-browser compliant linear gradient CSS, and I'm taking two parameters in my mixin, from and to. Right, this is a gradient, so I'm going to go from black to red color. I'm giving it default parameters, black and red. Just like in C# and Visual Basic and all that, you can have default parameters so that you don't have to specify a parameter when you call it, but you can if you want to. So now I can just go back here into my other Sass file. I'm going to import this one that we just looked at. And now I can simply do include. And now you get IntelliSense coming from whatever files that you have imported. Like the entire import chain is now available to you in IntelliSense. So we say, hey, gradient, save, and compiled. Done. Right? So this now lives on disk. Where are we? Right here. Right there. And not only that, but we also get source map and the minified output, just as we were used to from less. So this is Web Essentials and Visual Studio working really well together to solve a common problem here. The editor itself is really complicated, so Visual Studio is great for doing those sort of things. And Web Essentials add the missing pieces. So that's what we see here in action. I can also do other sort of stuff here. Here I have a color, and I can invoke the smart tag here that says extract all to variables. It will take all dark green colors of my entire style sheet here and extract to variable. Let's call it BG color. And here we go. And I can even hover, and it will tell me, oh, yeah, what is the value of my variables? Okay? So this is sort of CSS on steroids. Another little thing we did was add color swatches to the IntelliSense list itself. So now that makes it really easy for you to see here up front for named values how they look like. And we even show BG color here because we know that BG color's value is dark green, and dark green is a named color. Therefore, we show that right here. So we can do a lot of fun stuff with combining CSS and LIS and Sass and all those sort of things together. Of course, this works in all those 3 languages and editors. OK. So great new Sass editor, really, really first class. What we did, why it took us so long to do this, was because we wanted to finish LESS, the LESS editor. And the problem with building LESS editors and Sass editors is that we don't actually control the compilers. Those are all open source. They're out of our command. So we just have to sort of follow whatever direction they go. And that means that we were a little bit behind on some of the LESS stuff. So we spent some time updating LESS to be fully compliant with the latest compilers out there. And when we were done with that, we built the same thing for Sass. So that's why it took a little time, but now it's finally here. So let's take a look at HTML. So we have some new fun stuff here too. So we're always trying to make sure that we get like all the details right. And details is always problematic, but you saw here with the widths and width, like they matter, right? We don't even notice them, but they actually do matter. And so one of the things that's nice and visible is that we brought back in a better way a file picker. So let's do image source equals. You see here now you get like a full file picker up here. You can say images. It shows, notice how it actually have the right icons and everything. We can just take the logo here. When I hover it, it also shows that. So finally, we got that brought back. And of course, it works as you expect. You can open in here and go back, go forward. Everything from the keyboard. You don't need a mouse to do any of this. It's all in the keyboard. So this is using the same concepts that we have in CSS for the color picker that we show up. It's rich controls inside IntelliSense. Another thing that we always strive to be the best at, the best as we possibly can be, is to make sure that web standards are always as fresh and updated as possible. So here's an example. You might have heard of something called the Shadow DOM and Web Component Specification, which is early drafts and all those sort of things by W3C. But if you want to play around with it, and you can play around with it today, there are support for it in various browsers. But we do give you like full HTML IntelliSense for all of this new stuff right here, right? So we always want to be make sure that you have the latest. So that's very important. Now, if we're dealing with something like Bootstrap, I might find myself to have a link. And Bootstrap is this CSS framework that makes it really easy for us to get going really fast and make very pretty looking websites, especially for me because I cannot design anything. So Bootstrap really helps me out, makes my site look decent no matter what I do. And I can now turn a link into a button. And the way I would do that in Bootstrap is this. So we introduced this in 2013 RTM. You get all your class names from your entire project in. So now we can very easily say, I want this to be a button primary. Notice I type, but I don't type the dash. So we've improved the IntelliSense so that it's more natural. You don't have to type those weird characters. And now we can do this. Now it's going to complain. Why does this complain? It needs a button. Exactly. I forgot the base class. I don't necessarily know how Bootstrap works. I might be new to Bootstrap. So I don't know how it works. And I don't want to be sitting in the documentation all day. So we've added a few helpers here. If I hover it, it says, hey, when you're using button primary, you might also specify the BTN class. Let's do that. Now, if you did this before update 2, it would remove button primary. I'm sure you have run into this. like that, right? Because I hit enter. But if I just hit space, get the exact thing that we want, we can have multiple values. So we fixed those issues. So a lot of the stuff that you've been reporting to us since the first preview of 2013, we've been fixing that. So there's a lot of fixes here in Update 2. But notice how the error goes away. Web Essentials helps us in these situations where we forget certain things. You know, something like this, you spend 2 hours researching, why can't I figure this out? And it's just a stupid thing like this. So we try to make sure that that doesn't happen. Another thing, another example of this is when we're dealing with AngularJS. How many here use AngularJS or I've looked at it? Hands up. OK, that's a lot of hands. That's like 25% of you. OK. So we've been working on some of the Angular support. And in 2013, we gave you IntelliSense for stuff like ng controller, stuff like this. But we actually never gave you the data-ng controller, like right here. So let's just do this. Let's give it a name. It's going to complain. Why does it complain? This is tricky. This is one of those things. This entire feature right here actually came because I wasted 2 hours of my life. Okay? It says the ng app attribute is missing on a parent element. So this is not always the case, right? But when we have the HTML element, we know that we can't go further up. And we haven't seen an ng app element, attribute anywhere. So we can just add it like this. And you see the error now goes away. So this is sort of the thing that we're experimenting with in Web Essentials to see how we can tweak and help out with validation and IntelliSense and so on. So that's a great example of that. And speaking of Angular, let's go here. I have an Angular website. So this is an Angular website using ASP.NET Web Pages and AngularJS. And here I have my view. This is a template using handlebars, or actually Angular have their own sort of thing, but it looks very similar to handlebars or mustache or any of those. You see we have these double curlies. This is the handlebar syntax. You get nice highlighting of those. But by using Web Essentials, I get another little nice feature when I'm dealing with static HTML here in this case. And that is that I get the opportunity to automatically create a minified version of this HTML file. So when I create all my templates, we can automatically minify those for you so you send less bytes over the wire. And so it looks like this. It's just one long minified string. And anytime I make a change, like here, and if I save it, Visual Studio is going to say, hey, do you want to reload the min file? Sure. Right? And it's updated for us. So we get a lot of these small things. We can even add HTML bundles so you get this sort of a pseudo template cache mechanism here. We're still working on how we can do template caching correctly and really nice with Angular. It's coming. And we try to figure out how does it work with if you use Grunt or Gulp or any of those task runners today. So we're going to have something great coming out for that. But we don't have that yet. So in the meantime, this is actually really, really cool. So let's take a look at some of the JavaScript here. Here I have an Angular controller. I think Hanselman and Hunter showed this Wednesday. So let me actually explain how this works. So the problem with Angular is that everything in Angular is internal. They have their own dependency injection system, and it's all internal. We can't access those internal bits. So we have not been able to give you IntelliSense for it until very recently. And the thing is that we run, or Visual Studio runs, the Chakra Internet Explorer's JavaScript engine called Chakra to give you IntelliSense for everything. So it actually runs all your code. But because those dependency injection systems in Angular are internal, Chakra can't go in and figure out what's going on. So that's why it has been a problem. But as you see here, we get IntelliSense for all the built-in services like scope, or go here, location, right? Host. But look at this. We actually also get nice descriptions. So if you've ever worked with Angular, you know this is because Angular uses something called JS docs. They have added comments in the style of JS docs to describe their API. And we now support in Web Essentials the JavaScript or the JS doc syntax. So now we show this in the tooltips. It's very easy to get going with. But this is actually a pretty great experience. And even up here, where I have my own custom service in Angular, the testimonial factory here, I get full IntelliSense. So, and I can continue to get my IntelliSense all the way through my objects. These are my objects. These are exactly what I specified in my JavaScript files. All of that is what's being returned inside here in my Angular controller. So that's really, really nice. And finally, we have this. But I said that all of this is because that Chakra runs our code. So that also means that we can modify IntelliSense in the JavaScript editor through JavaScript. Okay? It's kind of weird, but the JavaScript extensibility point in Visual Studio for IntelliSense is through JavaScript. That's the only editor that does that. And let's just go take a look here. Let's go to, you know about Control Q, right? To get us up here in the search box, Java ref. And we can, here, implicit web. We have these two things showing up. Web Essentials gives us these two files. Sometimes Web Essentials is able to automatically add them to this list, and sometimes it's not. I haven't figured out exactly why yet. So in case that you don't have them, you can just simply add them yourself. Go in here, and then they're all located in C, users, your username, and right here, these two files. Okay? So let's just open that actually. This guy. There's a lot more than Angular in here. So what I've been trying to do is to take all the new JavaScript APIs that are out there and add IntelliSense support for them directly in Visual Studio. And this is easy. This is really easy. Here's the shadow DOM. Okay, this is just JavaScript. You can do this. You can do this yourself. Add this, and when you add it to the JavaScript references, any JavaScript file will get this. And what we can do, here we have the shadow root and shadow DOM. So now I can do something like this. Document get element by ID, something, create shadow root, right? Even the WebKit specific version of that. So now we can start streaming in all that modern IntelliSense for all those APIs that may or may not be implemented by all browser shit, but it's still something that you would want. So that's all available here now, and I hope that you're going to go to Web Essentials on GitHub and party on this file, because that would be really awesome to have super broad support for everything here. So let's just go to my JavaScript here in another project. I hate this. I hate the fact that, why do we have so many different jQuery stuff here, and it's all like one big list, right? It's really annoying. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to say file nesting, auto nest selected items. Boom. That's better. So this is an extension called file nesting. It does exactly what it's called. It nests files, it unnests them and all this sort of stuff. But really needed. We're actually working on getting this in Visual Studio. So it is coming at some point in the future, but you can get it right now in an extension called file nesting. So search for that. It's easy. So I was mentioning JS doc comments. And we now have a very nice way of creating JS doc comments because we get full auto-completion for them. So notice here, as I type this so this is my great function. I hit enter. We get a new star in place. I can say my parameter, param, look, I get IntelliSense here for my JS doc. Param, this is a number, x, and so some description of x, right? So now, when I call my function, it says my great function, and we can see that it takes a number. So not only can we do the XML syntax that we've been able to do for several years now, we now can do the same thing with JS docs, finally. So that is always nice. All right. Let me just back off here. So I showed you earlier, yesterday actually, that we have JS hint running. But this is not JS hint. This is JS CS. JS hint is fxcop for JavaScript. Think of it like that. JS CS is stylecop for JavaScript. And it's very, very new. It is a very new project. We already have support for it here. You know, I have an if statement without curly braces. Apparently it doesn't like that. That's OK. But that's really cool. What actually happens is that we run Node.js under the hood to run all this sort of stuff, including all the compilers. The Sass compiler, Less, JS hint, all this stuff all runs on Node in Web Essentials behind the scenes. And you know, you might disagree with some of these rules. So what we can do there is that we can either go up here in the Web Essentials menu and say, edit global JS hint settings. The problem with that is that they're global. Okay? That means that every project will now have the same rules, and that might not be what you want, because your team in that specific project, you have decided what are my fxcop and stylecop rules for JavaScript. So it probably is better if you just keep that local to your project. So we can totally do that. So I'm going to use, I have something installed called Sidewaffle. Anyone here have heard of Sidewaffle? Oh, awesome. Let me just show you. This is a great website. So Sidewaffle is a delicious side dish for Visual Studio. Okay? It's an extension, but what it really is, it's a template pack. And it gives us the opportunity to do something really cool. So I can add a new item here. Hey, do we have anything Angular? If I can spell it. Yes. Angular controllers, directories, factories, modules, even the TypeScript versions of that we can get in here. Right? That comes in through Sidewaffle. Sidewaffle gives us all these things that we, just helps us out, be more productive, or stuff that we don't use so often that we maybe forgot how to do it properly or how to get started with it. So Sidewaffle is really cool. Sidewaffle.com, you can go and download it there. But what I wanted to do, I wanted to get some JS hint stuff going. And I can add a JS hint rules file here. I'm just going to double click it. And it's going to open up in our brand new JSON editor. So we thought it was about time that Visual Studio had a JSON editor. Do you agree? Yes. OK. Because that's it really is the simplest editor that we have. And just by colorizing correctly, we get a lot better overview by looking at JSON. But of course, we can't really just stop there. So we have built in JSON schema support. So JSON schema is an emerging standard that lets us describe JSON. So think of it as XSDs for XML, but all in JSON. And let me demo that before I show you exactly what I mean by it. This is my rules file, JS hint RC. And here I have quote mark. So let's see here. We actually have IntelliSense for all the values that I can apply to this specific property. Okay? And I also get IntelliSense for all the properties. So there's no longer a reason to always go back and forth between documentation and Visual Studio. Right? We try to eliminate that with Bootstrap. We try to eliminate that here because we all know what happens when you go online. You end up on Facebook and 2 hours are gone, right? So we want to keep you here. And JSON schema helps us with that. And now I can just change here. I found my relaxing rule. Say, hey, do you want the semicolon rule? Do you want to tolerate missing semicolons? I'm just going to set this to true. And because this file is in my project, it's in my root of my project here. If I now go back here, we see the missing semicolon shows right here, right? I'm now going to save the file. And now the error is gone. So I can completely customize those rules, just like in fxcop. OK. So Let's actually take a look at some of this JSON stuff. Here's my JSON hint RC. So we have this new little drop-down showing up here. You see, I actually have uploaded the JSON schema file for JS hint RC to VS Web Essentials. And there's a reason why I haven't uploaded to the official JS hint GitHub repository, because it's not quite ready yet. So that we have some fine-tuning to do. We're done with it. It's going to be in the final version of update 2. But before that happens, I had to do some quirks to make it work. But it will be contributed to that project as soon as we're ready with it. And that's really cool. I can do anything I want. I already have a lot of different schemas up here. So I can now just open here awesome.json. It's pointing at a schema file. I don't think it exists. I can just delete this guy right there. So here's just a regular JSON file. And how do you write a JSON schema? Well, a good idea is to go and actually look at the website and see how it works. But we can cheat and just right-click and say generate JSON schema. And let's just call it myschema.json. And now it generates a schema based on what it sees. Yes? So what's really, really cool about this is that we can finally get that strongly typed nature that we're used to in Visual Studio for files like this. And that makes it really easy to just make my modifications. I can go in here to awesome.json and simply just type myschema.json. As soon as I do that, I get IntelliSense. I can see the company, just a regular property, but product is an object. OK. What about inside here in my product? Do I have that specified too? Name. Notice here I don't type the quotes. Name, I hit tab. It says the quotes for me. I can give it whatever name I want. Right, and what was the other one? Price. Here we go. You get full IntelliSense. So really, really rich experience. This is our version 1 of the JSON editor that you're seeing here in update 2. We're going to keep working on it. We're going to keep making it better. And we have a lot of surprises coming for you. Well, maybe not surprises, but a lot of goodies. I'll ruin the surprise right here for one thing at least. If you type something that's not allowed in the schema, like if you type an integer where the schema says it should be a string, today nothing happens. Hopefully in the next update, we'll get the full validation going as well. Right? So really, really cool stuff. And you can set these schemas as you want. You can use what I have. Do I have that here? Right here. You can use all sorts of different things. So one way of extending the behavior is to write your own schema or link to your own schema. Another way to extend this behavior is to extend it through Visual Studio APIs. So here's an example of what I'm doing right with that. So I'm actually using a schema called JSON-LD, JSON linked data. That is a very promising and an early specification that's used in something called Hydra. Hydra is a community-driven W3C effort that lets us describe our REST endpoints. Okay, so when we create web APIs, we can have a Hydra document in JSON that describes everything about it. Personally, I think that's really interesting because that would allow me to write tooling that you can say, add service reference pointed to a JSON endpoint, and we can scaffold in TypeScript, if that's what you want, the entire thing for you. Data layer, communication channel, all those sort of things. So I'm really interested in this JSON-LD stuff. We can use it for one more thing, and that's what I'm doing here, schema.org. Schema.org is a collaborative effort between Microsoft and Google and Yahoo for tagging up our website so that it looks great in search results. We can have like ratings in the search result, pictures of ourselves or whatever. You've all seen this when you search on Google or on Bing, right? We can control that through schema.org. They have now just extended that to do JSON-LD directly here in JSON. So because I'm using this schema, by the way, was contributed by us to the JSON-LD repository on GitHub. So we're really, really interested in this. And of course, I get this nice IntelliSense for all the @ properties here. They all come from JSON-LD. But I'm here using the API, the editor API, and saying, specifically for schema.org, I know exactly what to do. I understand schema.org. So what I'm going to give you is a way to tag up your website, tell the search engines how to behave, and I can give you full IntelliSense for it. So here we're saying the type is person. Okay, so now my extension says, if you're using schema.org and your type equals person, then it must be because you want IntelliSense for person. So you have job title, name, all of that show up right here. We have an address of a person, but that's of type postal address. So now here you get like street address and so on, postal code and so on. Right, so we can really, really target these things, and that makes it so great for configuration files, for instance. Okay. So I want to show you something. This is a website that I think you saw the other day. I was uploading this guy right here. It's still my favorite. And there was one demo that we actually had to cut from the keynote. So I wanted to show you that. And this is the actual project. And it has to do with these two buttons right here, Facebook and Twitter. So, you know, I'm optimizing my website. I want it to be as performant as possible. Here I have two images, right? Facebook and Twitter. That means the browser has to make two separate requests. I've shown earlier and last year at Build that we can base64 encode the image bytes themselves and stick them directly into our style sheets. And that's cool. That's really cool. But in a lot of cases, you want to create what's called an image sprite instead. So that means that you have one large image that has all your smaller images inside of it. This is not something that's easy to create or maintain, to say the least, right? This is actually really, really difficult stuff. That's why most people don't do that. But, of course, we have an answer for that. So in Visual Studio now, I can just go in here. Where's my site? Right here. Find my two images. They are right here. Of course, we get the nice hover preview right here, right? Select them, right-click, Web Essentials, create image sprite. Okay, let's give it a name. Social. And so what happens is that we now get a sprite file, a .sprite file. We just invented that. But the beauty of this is that you get IntelliSense for all the settings you can say. Do you want to optimize this sprite? What orientation should it have? Should we stack the images in the larger image vertically or horizontally, or how do you want that? What about the output? Should it be PNG? We can convert from any file format to any other one, so you decide here, right? And you can add or remove any files as you like. Okay? So that's the sprite file. But notice here we also get the PNG file. So this is the output, right? One image with two files in it, with two images in it, so to speak. And then we get CSS, LESS, and Sass. We also get a map file. We use it for absolutely nothing. It seemed like a good idea when we added it, but we don't really know why. If you have an idea, let me know. But let's take a look at the LESS file. So the LESS file here actually has two mixins. So I showed you mixins in Sass earlier, but this is a mixin in LESS. It looks a little bit different, but this is a reusable component that I can use. Yeah, I can hover this guy to see that we have two images here. But notice how I'm using background positioning to move between these two images. So this is LESS, and because it's LESS, I can go to my LESS file here, and I can import that LESS file, or that, yeah. So import, notice, hey, this is the same color picker as before. We saw in HTML. It's also here in LESS, so we call it social. Here we go. Gotta love the IntelliSense. And so now I have my two current images, as we see right here, right? So now I only have to do here is to replace them with my mixin. Thank you, Web Essentials. Keeping me awake here, that's good. Let's just put a one here. Notice how IntelliSense just flows again through my import chain. Okay, So now when I save this guy, Web Essentials compiles it, and I now have image sprites. This has never been easier, ever. Now, the beautiful thing about this is when it comes to maintaining my image sprites. This is the worst possible scenario, right? If I had a designer, maybe I would get like new PNGs and they would have to recreate them and all this sort of stuff. But we have this guy. We don't need that other, we don't need anyone else involved. We just need the individual elements, the individual images, and we can do all this ourselves. I can just add a new file element here, or I can just replace them. You know the trick, Alt and then arrow keys up and down to move lines up and down? So I can just move them around as I see fit. What was the right order? It had Twitter first, right? So now I'm going to replace them so Facebook is first, like this. Let's just save it. I can right-click, Web Essentials, update image sprite. Do you want to reload the less file? Sure. So now the less file has been updated. All of these files have been updated. It has the same names, okay? The names stay the same because they're generated based on the file name of the individual image. So that means I can rearrange my entire sprite. I can add, I can remove, I can do whatever I want, but because the names are the same, I don't have to care how it's all laid out anymore, and I don't have to update my less file, right? This just all happens automatically. So this is some of the real power you get with less and Sass, that you have this sort of dynamic capabilities. So that's cool. Okay. So as I mentioned, there's a lot of weird things in Web Essentials because sometimes we just throw stuff in there. Right? We don't really know, hey, maybe this will stick, maybe it won't. Who knows? And so one of the things that I've been adding here is something like, let's just create a div here. So I can now right-click, and I can encode to MD5. Right, that's awesome. This has been in Web Essentials for 2 years. No one has ever either complained or just mentioned it. It is still here. It's still here. So I'm going to keep it there. Right? It doesn't harm, I think. But that's sort of how it works. The only, we can do other stuff. We can reverse. Actually, this might come in handy. Like we can transform. We can reverse the entire thing. So you see, now I have my use case. So that's sort of the playground coming in here, and this is great for all of us because hey, if you have something you want to play around with, just put it in Web Essentials. If it's sort of quality is looking good and all that, we're going to take that pull request, totally. Right? This is just our playground. Okay. Let's do one last thing. You all saw this browser link feature the other day, and you've probably played around with it yourself, I would think. I'm going to use Sidewaffle again. Sidewaffle is our good friend here, and we're going to say File New Project. And we're not going to go web this time. We're going to say extensibility. And we have something called browser link extension. Okay? Let's not care about the name. Let's just go for this guy. So this is how all the stuff that you've seen with design mode and inspect mode and the menu that gets injected to your pages, all that stuff is all created by what I'm showing you here. 2 files. A C# file and a JavaScript file. Okay? That is all there is needed to do browser link extensions. I'm saying this because I really want you to write them, okay? Because there's so much potential in browser link and what it can do, right? Just the power of the internet in terms of what's out there in services that we can call through Ajax, get the results back in, and then send it off to Visual Studio to do amazing stuff, and all that is something that we're really interested in seeing what you're going to do with. And it works like this. I have a class. That's my iBrowserLink factory. And it's basically just right here. It's going to return my JS file. Okay? It's just reading the JS file from my assembly. I have added it as a resource. But you could even do an HTTP request here if you wanted to. Okay? It just needs to return a string. So here, the only thing this does is returning my JavaScript. When SignalR, this runs by SignalR, when SignalR has the connection going between Visual Studio and the browsers, this event fires, unconnected. And here I'm doing something so fantastic that I'm saying, hey, the browser that just connected to Visual Studio, invoke a JavaScript function called greeting and pass in this string as a parameter. Okay? So if we go to JavaScript, this is all there is. We can see we have a function called greeting that takes a parameter that simply just outputs to the console that message. So if I just run this, I have now calling from C# directly into JavaScript running on my page. This JavaScript can do anything I want, right? Anything JavaScript can do because it's running in the context of your page. It's not sandboxed or anything. You can do whatever you want, such as injecting DOM elements, as I'm doing with the menu, but AJAX calls and all this sort of stuff. And when the JavaScript can also do this when it's connected, an event is also fired, and we do the exact same thing. We say browserlink.invoke. Invoke a method in C# called sendText and pass it in some string here as a parameter. And that's what we have right here, sendText. It takes a string, and it just gives us an alert box in Visual Studio. Okay? All we need is this little attribute. This is a complete bidirectional example of a browserlink extension, sending messages from Visual Studio to the browser and from the browser to Visual Studio. It's really this simple. So I hope that you're going to check out Sidewaffle and create some beautiful and really cool browserlink extensions. That's why we built the entire feature to begin with. The entire feature was actually never meant for us to do all sorts of cool stuff. It was always meant to be a solid API that you would build stuff for, right? So check out Web Essentials. You see so many examples how to do it. And of course, we gave you IntelliSense. Let me just stress this. This took me a while to write, so I'm just going to say because it makes me feel good. So browserlink.invoke, you see you have IntelliSense for the whole thing. You even have the overloads. You can see exactly what's going on. This is JavaScript, right? You get the full, sort of the full thing here. So you get all this for free. Awesome. We have been updating BrowserLink for this release. We were not able to run BrowserLink on SSL before, on HTTPS, because now there's like a cross-domain thing. But we've sorted out, we figured out how to do it, so now BrowserLink runs on HTTPS. Also, static HTML files did not get the source mapping. Right? We have source mapping built in. BrowserLink in the JavaScript knows each DOM element where it lives in the source code. Okay? That information, that source mapping, was not possible to get for static HTML before, but now it is. So there's a lot of infrastructural improvements coming, and we're actually going to ship some extensions very soon that takes advantage of some of this stuff. One of the things we're working on right now is to stream CSS. As you type in Visual Studio, just automatically stream it. You don't have to save, you don't have to do anything, just type. HTML coming later as well. So one thing that I hope that you guys will do, I demoed this last year at Build, and this is actually a true story. I forgot to back up my machine, and I did a reboot, so I lost that one demo that syncs anything I type in one browser, in one form field. It does the same in all the browsers. I actually lost that code. This is true. And so I hope that maybe one of you guys is ready to implement that. That would be nice. I think that's a great feature. All right. So we have 5 minutes left for questions. And before we start, please find a microphone. I do have more Visual Studio stickers up here. And very exclusively, I had 50 Web Essentials stickers made. There's 11 left. Okay? To any question. Anyone with a question gets a Web Essentials sticker? Fire away. Yes, sir.
How do you decide which of the many open source projects to include support in? For example, Angular, Bootstrap, so on and so forth.
Yeah, so when it came to Angular and Bootstrap, we it wasn't apparent to begin with, but what we can see now is that the trend is going very much in favor of those two projects. And so we don't want to write our own, we don't want to make our own stuff. Instead, we want to make sure that we work with whatever you guys want to use. And it seems like you have all chosen Angular over a lot of other stuff. So it's basically where our users go, we follow, right? Yep. Any more questions? Oh, yes, sir. All right.
You got that little error box that's like something went wrong in Web Essentials.
Yes.
You said you were going to start testing. Is that going to go down? And can we fix those things?
Yes.
Like,
That's a brilliant question. What about those error messages? That is going to go down drastically. Right? It already have. This I can't account for that just happened here. But that is going to go down. The entire purpose of the testing is for this specific purpose, and if there's any crashes, to eliminate all of those. That is going down. What you can do when you get one of those is to go to your browser and just find the call stack. So I have it bookmarked. So I have the activity log right here, and it will show you if there is an error. You can see it right here. Sometimes it's Web Essentials. This one very much looks like it could be. Has my name on it. But so yeah, you can fix these. And if not, report them, and I'll take a look. Yeah. Sticker for user. Yep. Yep.
You have the bundling in the went blank there. How does that work with the bundling in ASP.NET MVC? The bundling you have in Web Essentials.
Are you talking about BrowserLink?
I mean, where you can bundle JavaScript files together and CSS files.
Yes, so in ASP.NET, we have this NuGet package called System Web Optimization that lets you, and it's on by default when you say File New Project. We use System Web Optimization to bundle JavaScript and CSS. Web Essentials can do the exact same thing. It can bundle and minify as well. So this is just up to you. If you like to do it at runtime, because that's what System Web Optimization does, it does it at runtime. If you're fine with that, if that makes you happy, keep using that. If you want to do it at design time, then you might want to look at Web Essentials. So maybe you're more in control. You like the static nature of just sending over the raw static files instead, and maybe send them out to CDNs and so on. Web Essentials might be a good bet for you. Right. So it's what you're comfortable with. I think we're over here.
Okay. Why do you want to use JS doc instead of XML documentation?
Why I want to use JSON instead of XML? Yeah. Was that the question?
JS doc.
Oh.
Yeah.
Why do you want to use JS doc instead of XML doc? Well, you might. Maybe you don't. It doesn't matter. The thing is that it's only Visual Studio that understands XML doc. The rest of the world sort of decided that JS doc was the way to go. Right? So you might have libraries that you get through, even through NuGet, or Bower, or however else you get your JavaScript libraries that uses JS doc. So it would be nice if we at least show you that richness that it gives in the editor. So that's why it's important that we get that support. Yeah.
Do you have any plans to support a Foundation framework?
We don't currently today support a Foundation like I was showing you with squiggling with Bootstrap, but that would be trivial to add. That would be trivial to add. Yep. Yes, sir.
Yeah, listening to you talk about JSON schema just makes me cringe because we went through everything with SOAP and XML.
Yes.
And we finally got away from that when you got the dynamic goodness and lightweight, and I don't have to worry about that versioning.
Yep.
So do we really want to go down that path?
I've got that question a lot. I think it depends on how you want to use it. For what I demoed here, how to use it for IntelliSense to help you, I think that is brilliant. And JSON schema is the only answer for that today. It is a draft spec on IETF, but I agree with you. We don't want to end up in the XML schema world that we've had previously. Yeah. But all right, I'm being told to stop. So thank you very much. Come up and get your stickers.